Welcome to Zoe Stories. 60 years old, now a woman. At 60 years old, Robert had grown accustomed to the quiet rhythm of his life. He lived alone in a modest but warmly furnished apartment in the heart of the city, a space filled with memories and little quirks only he could appreciate. His walls bore photographs of his youth, framed sketches from years gone by, and books stacked in every corner, some worn, others pristine. Yet beneath the calm exterior lay a secret that had never left him, a secret that even his closest friends, and for decades, his wife before she passed, never knew. Robert had always felt a pull toward femininity, a subtle curiosity that started as a boy, hidden behind closed doors. It wasn't something he understood fully at the time. It was thrilling, forbidden, and deeply personal. Over the years, as life demanded conformity, his desire to explore this side of himself quietly persisted. Now, as he faced the twilight of his life, he wondered if it was too late to finally embrace it. His occupation as a retired architect kept him disciplined, meticulous, and orderly. He had built structures that touched the skyline, but his own life had always remained contained, structured, and in many ways hidden. With retirement came freedom, a chance to finally explore the facets of himself he had long suppressed. But he knew he could not do it alone. Enter Isabella. She was a vivacious, bold, and empathetic woman, decades younger than Robert, but drawn to his calm intellect and subtle charm. Their connection was unusual, layered with trust and curiosity. Isabella had discovered Robert's secret quite by accident one evening, and instead of judgment, she offered guidance, encouragement, and companionship. She became his confidant, mentor, and friend, the person with whom Robert could explore his feminine side safely. The apartment itself became a sanctuary. The living room smelled faintly of lavender and old wood, with soft lighting that softened the shadows and made the space feel intimate. On a quiet Tuesday morning, Robert found himself standing before a full-length mirror, draped in a soft robe. Today was different. Isabella had encouraged him to try something he had never done before, fully step into his feminine persona, not just with subtle hints, but with intention. He glanced at the carefully laid-out outfit on the bed, a delicate silk dress in soft pastel, a pair of elegant heels, and accessories that gleamed under the warm light. His heart raced. At 60, the thrill of stepping into a woman's shoes was unlike anything he had experienced. It wasn't just the clothes or makeup. It was the feeling of rebirth, of living a side of himself that had been dormant for decades. There was hesitation, of course. Society had ingrained in him caution, fear of judgment, and the constant nagging of too late. But Isabella's voice lingered in his mind. It's never too late to be yourself. Age is just a number. What matters is your happiness. He remembered their conversations about femininity, about self-expression, and about the thrill of crossing boundaries safely. Isabella had even suggested small experiments at first, painting his nails, wearing a scarf, trying subtle makeup. Each step had been intoxicating, but today, the stakes felt higher. Today was about full transformation, seeing himself entirely as the woman he felt inside. Robert sat on the edge of his bed, hands trembling slightly, and picked up a small compact mirror. He applied the foundation, brushing it gently across his skin, feeling the smoothness, feeling the excitement and vulnerability mingling together. Next came the blush, the soft strokes of color giving his cheeks a gentle glow, followed by the mascara that framed his eyes with a newfound intensity. With each touch, the reflection staring back at him became less familiar, yet strangely comforting. He stood, slipping into the silk dress, the fabric hugging curves that had been hidden for so long. The heels clicked softly against the wooden floor, a sound both foreign and empowering. He twirled slowly in front of the mirror, feeling a sense of exhilaration mixed with fear. Would Isabella approve? Would the world accept him, even if just in this private moment? The questions raced through his mind, but he pushed them aside. In that moment, Robert realized the story of his life was changing. At 60 years old, he was not just a man stepping into a woman's clothing. He was a man reclaiming parts of himself that had been silenced for decades. His heart raced with anticipation, but he also felt a sense of peace he hadn't known in years. The room's soft lighting cast gentle shadows across his face as he experimented with his hair, brushing it gently, styling it with care, and finally placing a delicate necklace around his neck. Each detail mattered. Each moment was a celebration of self-expression. The transformation was not just physical, it was emotional, liberating, and intoxicatingly real. As he admired the reflection, a knock on the door startled him. Isabella had arrived earlier than expected. The suspense tightened his chest, a mixture of excitement and fear, but also trust. This was a pivotal moment in his journey. Would she approve? Would she be amazed or shocked? He swallowed hard, straightened his dress, and opened the door, ready to face the consequences of embracing his true self. And that was where his story began. 60 years old, yet stepping fully into a new identity, a thrilling world of crossdressing, emotional discovery, and transformative experiences. A world where age didn't limit desire, curiosity, or exploration. A world where Robert could finally answer the question he had held for decades: who am I truly meant to be? The apartment was quiet, almost eerily so, as Robert stood in front of the full-length mirror. Morning sunlight streamed through the curtains, casting soft golden lines across the floor. Everything was in place. The silk dress laid carefully on the bed, the heels gleaming next to it, makeup arranged in precise order. His hands trembled slightly as he picked up the delicate fabric, feeling its softness brush against his fingers. Today was different. Today, he wasn't just experimenting, he was committing fully to this long-suppressed side of himself. At 60, Robert had never felt a thrill like this. The journey to this moment had been long and tortuous, a lifetime of secrets folded neatly into the corners of his existence. For decades, he had pushed away curiosity, convinced himself that his desires were frivolous, inappropriate, or simply too late to explore. Yet now, with Isabella's gentle encouragement and guidance, he realized that it was never too late. That quiet whisper of self-expression he had ignored for years was now screaming, demanding, urging him to step into it completely. He undressed slowly, removing his day clothes with meticulous care. Each article of clothing left him feeling both exposed and liberated, a contradiction that made his pulse quicken. The soft rustle of fabric and the click of shoes hitting the hardwood floor felt like drumbeats to an orchestra only he could hear. He picked up the dress and hesitated, gazing at it with a mixture of awe and apprehension. Would it fit? Would it look ridiculous on him? The questions tumbled through his mind, but he pushed them aside. This is for me. No one else matters. As he slipped into the dress, the silky fabric gliding over his skin, he felt a shiver run through his body. The sensation was intoxicating, a mixture of vulnerability and exhilaration. It hugged him in all the right places, shaping his body into a form that, until now, had only existed in fleeting imagination. He adjusted the straps and smoothed the wrinkles, feeling the transformation in every fiber of his being. Standing there, fully dressed for the first time, Robert could barely recognize himself, and yet, he felt more like himself than he had in decades. Next came the makeup, a delicate ritual that Isabella had taught him. He picked up the foundation, applying it carefully with a brush, watching as his skin softened, lines diminished, and his reflection became unfamiliar yet inviting. Blush, eyeshadow, mascara, each stroke transformed him further, not just physically but emotionally. He marveled at the reflection staring back at him. A 60-year-old man, yes, but one whose eyes sparkled with the light of a secret identity coming to life. Each detail mattered. The contouring that emphasized his cheekbones, the subtle eyeliner that made his eyes appear larger, the soft color on his lips that hinted at a vulnerability he had never allowed himself to show. The heels were next, a simple yet daunting challenge. He had practiced walking in them alone countless times, but now, fully transformed, they felt like extensions of himself, both thrilling and unnerving. He took tentative steps, the heels clicking softly against the wooden floor, each step a declaration. He was embracing this side of himself completely, without shame, Without hesitation, he twirled once, then again, feeling the fabric swirl around his legs, the sensation electric and almost dizzying. Yet with excitement came fear. Alone in the apartment, fully dressed and made up, Robert felt the weight of exposure pressing down on him. Every sound outside, the distant hum of traffic, the soft creak of the building settling, made him jump. What if someone sees me? The thought was terrifying. For years he had lived in shadows. Now, he was standing fully in the light, vulnerable in ways he had never imagined. His pulse quickened, his hands shook slightly, but he refused to retreat. The thrill was too intoxicating. He practiced gestures, the subtle tilt of his head, the delicate way his hands rested against his hips, the sway of his shoulders. Isabella had taught him that femininity wasn't just about clothes or makeup, it was movement, posture, the way he carried himself. Each small adjustment felt transformative, shaping not only his appearance but the way he felt inside. For the first time in decades, he felt aligned with his inner self, each motion reinforcing the identity he had kept hidden for so long. Time seemed to blur as he explored each detail, adjusting the wig, brushing it carefully to frame his face, placing a delicate necklace around his neck, selecting earrings that glimmered in the soft light. Each element completed the persona, yet also heightened his vulnerability. Alone, he was both empowered and exposed, teetering on the edge between exhilaration and fear. And then it happened, a soft knock at the door. Robert froze. His heart lurched, a cold wave of panic rushing through him. He wasn't expecting anyone. Isabella was out, running a quick errand. Who could it be? He crouched slightly behind the curtain, peering toward the door, every nerve on edge. The knock came again, louder this time, deliberate. His mind raced. Could it be a neighbor? A friend? Someone discovering me like this? The thrill of secrecy now twisted into terror. He considered hiding, but the dress and heels made quick movement impossible. Each second stretched, the suspense nearly unbearable. His pulse thundered in his ears as he debated his next move, caught between the intoxicating allure of being seen as his true self and the overwhelming fear of exposure. He took a deep breath, straightened his dress, and prepared to confront whatever awaited on the other side of the door. The mirror reflected him once more, silk, heels, makeup, and hair, his full transformation laid bare. The image was both empowering and fragile, a delicate balance of risk and reward. With trembling hands, he reached for the doorknob, every muscle tense, every thought racing. The suspense gripped him completely, leaving the audience wondering, who is at the door? Will Robert be discovered in his feminine persona? Or will he escape exposure this time? And with that question hanging in the air, the screen fades, leaving viewers on the edge, desperate to know what happens next. Robert closed the door slowly, his back pressed against it for a moment, heart still racing from the unexpected knock. Relief washed over him, but it was short-lived. The adrenaline left his hands shaky, and he realized just how close he had come to exposure. Yet, as he looked back at the mirror, a strange sense of pride mingled with fear. He had faced a moment of potential discovery, and he had survived it. With Isabella still out, Robert knew this was his chance to push further. He studied his reflection, noting every detail, the curve of the dress around his waist, the soft glow of the blush on his cheeks, the way the wig framed his face. He reached for a pair of earrings he hadn't worn before, small but glittering, and carefully attached them. Each tiny addition brought him deeper into the persona, yet also heightened his vulnerability. He practiced speaking softly, his voice trembling slightly at first. "Hello, is anyone there?" he whispered to the empty room. The sound of his own words made him pause. They were lighter, softer, more delicate than his natural tone. The unfamiliarity both thrilled and unsettled him. Could he really embody this persona convincingly? Could he convince not just others, but himself? Robert moved to the living room, heels clicking softly on the wooden floor. He experimented with posture, recalling Isabella's lessons, shoulders back, spine straight, movements fluid. He twirled once, then again, feeling the fabric of the dress swirl around his legs. The sensation was intoxicating. Every step, every gesture, every glance in the mirror a revelation of self-expression he had long denied. He smiled at the reflection, a mixture of awe and disbelief. But the thrill was tempered by fear. He thought about the years he had hidden this side of himself, the judgments he had internalized, the ridicule he imagined from the world. Am I too old to look convincing? Too old to be taken seriously? The questions gnawed at him, but he refused to let them dominate. With each experiment in movement and speech, his confidence grew. The fear lingered, yes, but it became a companion rather than a cage. The apartment felt like a stage, and he was finally free to perform, to explore, to inhabit the person he had always longed to be. He moved deliberately, practicing gestures and poses that emphasized elegance. A subtle tilt of the head, a slow sweep of the hand, a sway of the hips, each motion shaped the persona further. He began to imagine scenarios. Walking into a room full of people, speaking with a gentle confidence, carrying himself with grace. The exercises were thrilling, and a part of him yearned to take the leap beyond the private sanctuary of his apartment. As he adjusted his wig once more, he caught a glimpse of a photograph on the wall, himself in his younger years, confident and carefree, yet always constrained by societal expectations. A wave of emotions swept through him. This persona he was creating was not a denial of his past self, but an expansion of it, a way to embrace facets of identity that had been suppressed for decades. Tears pricked at the corners of his eyes, not of sadness, but of profound relief and recognition. Robert experimented further with makeup, adding a deeper shade of lipstick and darkening the eyeliner slightly. Each subtle change transformed his appearance, sharpening the contrast between the man he had always been and the woman he was discovering. He practiced smiles, observing how they altered the reflection, how they added layers of charm, allure, and personality. Hours passed unnoticed as he immersed himself in the transformation. The thrill of exploration, combined with the ever-present fear of exposure, created a heady mix. He reveled in the power of secrecy, the knowledge that no one else could see this side of him, that this identity belonged entirely to him. Yet he also felt the tension of anticipation. Isabella's return could shift everything. Would she approve of how far he had taken it? Would she be impressed or concerned? Suddenly, the quiet of the apartment was pierced by the sound of footsteps in the hallway. Robert froze, every muscle tensing. He hadn't expected anyone, and his heart lurched violently. Could it be Isabella? Or worse, another neighbor, another friend, discovering him fully dressed? His mind raced, scenarios flashing by, embarrassment, ridicule, rejection. He gripped the edge of the table, trying to steady himself. The footsteps grew closer, deliberate, and then stopped just outside the door. Robert's pulse pounded so loudly he thought it might echo in the room. He considered hiding, changing back, but the thought of abandoning the persona he had worked so hard to embrace made him hesitate. The reflection in the mirror seemed to mock him, daring him to stay in character. With a trembling hand, he approached the door slowly, every step measured. He peeked through the peephole and saw a familiar face, the neighbor from a few days ago, holding a package. Relief and tension mingled, leaving him dizzy. He opened the door cautiously, smiled politely, and accepted the package, heart still racing. Once the door closed, he exhaled, laughing softly at his own nerves. Sitting back in front of the mirror, Robert reflected on the emotional roller coaster of the day. Confidence and vulnerability were intertwined, inseparable. The thrill of cross-dressing fully, coupled with the fear of exposure, had created a heady mixture that left him exhilarated and exhausted. He realized he was capable of inhabiting this persona in ways he hadn't imagined. The excitement of self-expression, the liberation of embracing identity, was intoxicating. And yet, the suspense lingered. Isabella could return at any moment, and with her arrival, he would have to navigate the delicate balance between exposure and authenticity. Could he maintain the persona under her gaze? Could he reveal the depth of his transformation without fear? The questions hung in the air, unresolved, creating a magnetic tension that demanded resolution. Robert adjusted his wig, smoothed his dress, and practiced a slow, deliberate twirl in front of the mirror, every step a declaration of newfound confidence. Yet, at the back of his mind, the unanswered question remained: what if Isabella walks in now? Will she accept everything I've become, or will this be the moment that shatters the illusion entirely? The suspense was unbearable, the stakes higher than ever. And then, as he paused to admire the reflection once more, he heard a soft, deliberate sound, the unmistakable click of keys in the apartment next door, followed by a familiar, echoing voice calling his name. His heart stopped. Isabella was home, earlier than expected. The click of Isabella's keys echoed through the apartment, reverberating against the walls and sending a jolt of electricity through Robert's chest. He froze mid-step, the silk of his dress brushing against his legs as he gripped the edge of the table. Isabella's presence was a double-edged sword. Her approval had always been a source of comfort, yet the thought of being seen like this, fully transformed, made him unbearably vulnerable. He took a deep breath, steadying himself, and decided to face the moment head-on. The heels clicked with deliberate rhythm as he walked toward the living room, each step an assertion of confidence and control. Isabella's footsteps grew louder in his ears, and he felt the familiar rush of fear mingled with exhilaration. He had been practicing this moment for weeks in private, imagining the thrill of being admired, of having someone witness the woman he had longed to be. Yet reality was far more intense than fantasy. Isabella appeared in the doorway, her eyes widening slightly as she took in the full scope of his transformation. She was silent for a heartbeat, absorbing every detail: the soft glow of blush on his cheeks, the shimmer of his earrings, each elegant sway of his hips in heels. Robert felt his pulse quicken under her gaze. He had expected praise, perhaps, but the intensity of her observation made him feel exposed, like a tightrope walker dangling above a chasm of judgment and desire. "Wow," she breathed, stepping closer. "You've gone further than I imagined, and yet it suits you perfectly." Robert's knees nearly buckled at the compliment. He swallowed, a mix of relief and lingering anxiety swirling inside him. Her words were intoxicating, a validation of years of secret longing, yet the suspense lingered. What would she think of the more intimate details, the subtle gestures, the voice he had worked so hard to perfect? Encouraged by her approval, he allowed himself to experiment further. He twirled slowly, the fabric of the dress catching the light, and tried out a few poses Isabella had suggested before. Each movement felt thrilling. Each adjustment of posture or tilt of the head amplified the elegance he was discovering. He practiced speaking softly, his voice modulated to match the persona, and felt a rush of pride as Isabella nodded in quiet approval. Yet temptation pushed him further. Alone, he had explored cautiously, fearful of exposure. Now, with Isabella present, he was emboldened, daring to take risks that had once terrified him. He selected a bold scarf from the wardrobe, draping it across his shoulders and letting it flutter dramatically as he moved. The effect was intoxicating. He felt beautiful, desired, and dangerously alive in a way that decades of caution had never allowed. But with thrill came tension. Every movement, every gesture, every glance at Isabella's approving but observant eyes heightened the stakes. Robert knew that one wrong step, a slip of the heel, a misapplied touch of lipstick, or an unnatural gesture, could shatter the delicate illusion he had built. The thought made him hyper-aware, every nerve on edge. Yet the danger also fueled the excitement. He realized that the risk of exposure was part of the allure, part of the transformation itself. He experimented with makeup once more, subtly deepening the eyeliner and adding a touch of lip gloss. Isabella leaned closer, offering advice in her soft, encouraging tone, guiding his hands, adjusting his posture. The intimacy of her guidance made his heart flutter. He realized that crossdressing was no longer just about clothing or appearance. It was about trust, vulnerability, and connection. The thrill was emotional as much as it was physical. Time seemed to slow as he moved fluidly through poses and gestures, each one building confidence while simultaneously heightening suspense. He laughed softly at himself, delighting in the novelty of his own elegance, but he remained acutely aware of the fragility of the moment. Isabella's presence was both a shield and a test, a reminder that approval and admiration could be fleeting, dependent on perfection and timing. Suddenly, a sharp sound shattered the bubble of intimacy. The apartment's intercom buzzed, startling Robert so violently that he nearly stumbled in his heels. His heart raced, palms sweating. Who could it be now? Was it a delivery, a neighbor, someone who might see him fully transformed? Panic threatened to consume him, but he forced himself to breathe, to stay poised, to maintain the persona he had painstakingly crafted. Isabella noticed immediately, stepping forward, a curious and amused smile playing on her lips. "It's probably nothing," she whispered, though the sparkle in her eyes betrayed her own enjoyment of the suspense. "But let's see how you handle it." Robert approached the intercom cautiously, maintaining every ounce of feminine grace he could muster. He pressed the button, his voice soft but steady. "Hello." A familiar voice responded. It was the building manager, announcing a routine maintenance visit. Relief flooded him, but it was tinged with lingering adrenaline. The near exposure had reinforced the thrill, the precarious balance of excitement and fear that came with fully embracing his identity. He returned to Isabella, a mixture of pride, exhilaration, and lingering anxiety painting his features. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of experimentation. Robert tested new accessories, practiced different hairstyles, and explored voice modulation further. Isabella provided gentle guidance, praise, and playful teasing, creating a dynamic that was simultaneously empowering and suspenseful. Each success bolstered his confidence, yet the underlying fear of exposure never fully left, keeping the tension alive. By evening, Robert realized that he had pushed his limits further than he had ever imagined possible. The transformation was no longer partial or tentative, it was complete, fully realized, and breathtaking. Yet the emotional stakes had never been higher. Isabella's presence, the potential for discovery, and his own exhilaration created a heady mix that left him simultaneously empowered and vulnerable. And then, just as he settled into a moment of triumph, a sudden noise from the hallway froze him in place. The doorknob rattled slightly, a sound that immediately sent a shiver down his spine. Robert's pulse thundered in his ears. Who was it? Another neighbor? A visitor? Someone discovering him fully dressed and made up? The suspense was unbearable, the stakes higher than ever, and the question hung in the air. Would Robert maintain his persona, or would this unexpected intrusion shatter everything he had built? Robert's heart was still racing from the rattling doorknob. His heels clicked softly against the floor as he froze mid-step, every muscle tense, every nerve alert. The apartment, once a sanctuary, now felt like a stage set for disaster. Each shadow seemed alive, each sound amplified, and every movement carried the risk of exposing his secret. He slowly inched toward the door, maintaining the delicate sway of his hips, the fluidity Isabella had taught him. His hand hovered over the doorknob, trembling slightly. Whoever was outside could see him like this, could see the full extent of his transformation. 60 years of life, all his inhibitions, poured into this fragile, elegant persona. The thrill that had accompanied his earlier experiments now turned into a dagger of tension, slicing through his confidence. A deep breath, and he pressed his eye to the peephole. Through the small circular lens, he saw the building's maintenance worker, an ordinary man, oblivious to the drama unfolding inside. Relief washed over him in a wave, but it was fleeting. In the act of retreating, Robert's heel caught on the edge of the rug, sending him stumbling slightly. His hands flew to steady himself, knocking over a small decorative vase. The clatter reverberated through the apartment. Robert froze, chest heaving, eyes darting toward the hallway. He expected footsteps, angry voices, the sound of discovery, but there was only silence. Still, the danger of exposure had never felt more real. The adrenaline surged, mingling with exhilaration. He realized that the thrill wasn't just in the transformation, it was in the razor-thin line between secrecy and revelation. He carefully picked up the vase, adjusting it and smoothing his dress, praying that no one had noticed. Isabella's absence gave him both freedom and fear. He could indulge in the persona fully, but he also bore full responsibility for any mistake. The duality of exhilaration and vulnerability had never been clearer. Determined to regain composure, Robert returned to the living room, where the mirrors reflected a vision that both thrilled and terrified him. He adjusted his wig and smoothed the dress, trying to reclaim the elegance and grace that had briefly slipped. Every movement now carried a heightened awareness. The click of his heels, the sway of his hips, the tilt of his head. All could betray him if anyone were watching. He decided to continue experimenting, pushing the boundaries even further. With a daring glance at the mirror, he tried a bold outfit Isabella had suggested earlier, a flowing skirt paired with a fitted blouse, dramatic earrings, and a scarf that added flair. The transformation was breathtaking, yet each adjustment made him feel more exposed, more vulnerable. Every reflection reminded him of the stakes. The persona he had built could be shattered in a single misstep. Suddenly, the intercom buzzed again. Robert froze, feeling sweat prick his forehead. Not again, he thought, heart-hammering. Each intrusion, each unexpected sound, heightened the suspense and thrill. He forced himself to breathe, slowly, carefully, and pressed the button. A familiar voice called out. It was the building manager, apologizing for another minor maintenance task. Robert exhaled, hands trembling slightly. Relief and tension intertwined, leaving him dizzy with adrenaline. But the sense of near exposure had changed him. No longer was this simply an experiment in private indulgence. The thrill, the suspense, the fear of discovery, it had become addictive. Robert moved carefully, testing gestures and poses, feeling the elegance of the heels and fabric, yet aware of how easily it could all unravel. He realized that the persona he had crafted was fragile, dependent on composure, attention, and timing. One wrong move, and the secret would be laid bare. Hours passed in this heightened state. Robert practiced subtle movements, refined the tilt of his head, perfected the sway of his hips, and tested his voice with delicate inflections. Isabella's absence was keenly felt. Her guidance would have reassured him, provided balance, but the experience now forced him to rely on his instincts. The exhilaration of self-expression mingled with the constant threat of exposure, creating a tension that was almost unbearable. As evening fell, Robert's attention was caught by a sudden creak in the hallway outside the apartment. His heart leapt, and he froze, standing perfectly still. Every muscle tensed as the sound of footsteps approached the door. This time, there was no miscommunication. Someone was coming, and he couldn't control it. The suspense reached its peak, every second stretching endlessly. He considered hiding, changing back, anything to avoid discovery. But the heels, the dress, the fully realized persona, all made retreat difficult. He took a deep breath, steadying his pulse, and decided to face the moment, to maintain every ounce of dignity he could muster. He inched toward the door, eyes wide, breath shallow, every sense alert. And then the footsteps stopped. A shadow appeared beneath the doorframe. Robert's pulse thundered in his ears. He realized he was caught, or at least on the brink of it. The suspense was electric, the tension unbearable, leaving the audience desperate to know. Who is at the door? Will Robert's secret be exposed? Or will he somehow escape, maintaining his fragile, beautiful persona? The footsteps outside the door had faded, leaving Robert standing frozen in the center of the apartment. His heels clicked softly as he moved back toward the mirror, every step deliberate, controlled, practiced. The adrenaline that had gripped him all afternoon was beginning to ebb, replaced by a steady, focused awareness. He realized that the near exposures, the sudden interruptions, and the delicate balance of secrecy had taught him something invaluable. Confidence wasn't just about appearance, it was about composure, poise, and control under pressure. Robert studied himself in the mirror, tracing the lines of his reflection with careful attention. The dress fit perfectly, the silk flowing over his body with an elegance that still took his breath away. The makeup emphasized his features subtly yet powerfully, and the wig framed his face in soft waves, completing the transformation. For the first time, he allowed himself to feel pride, not shame, not hesitation, but genuine, unguarded pride in the woman he had become. He practiced a slow, confident walk, moving from room to room as though he owned the space. Each movement was fluid, a blend of grace and strength, and he felt a new kind of power coursing through him. The thrill of secrecy had taught him patience and precision. The repeated near exposures had sharpened his instincts. He realized that he could maintain this persona under observation, could embody it fully even when others were around. Isabella returned shortly afterward, carrying a small bag of groceries. Her eyes lit up when she saw him, and she paused for a long moment in the doorway, taking in the full scope of his transformation. She smiled, her expression a mixture of admiration and mischief. "Well, look at you," she said softly, her voice carrying both approval and a teasing edge. "You've really come into your own, haven't you?" Robert's pulse quickened, but this time not from fear. Her presence, once a source of tension, now felt like validation. He smiled back, letting the confidence he had cultivated over the afternoon radiate outward. I think I finally understand it," he said quietly. All of this, it's who I am. And I don't want to hide it anymore." Isabella stepped closer, setting the groceries down and reaching out to adjust a strand of hair that had fallen over his shoulder. Her touch was gentle, reinforcing the bond of trust that had allowed Robert to explore this side of himself so fully. "I know," she said, her eyes sparkling. "And you're breathtaking. But remember, this is just the beginning. The real challenge is living it, truly stepping into this life, while the world still sees the man you used to be." Robert nodded, the weight of her words settling over him. The thrill of private experimentation had given way to the reality of daily existence. Every step, every interaction, every glance from others could now carry the risk of exposure or rejection. And yet, he no longer felt fear as he had before. Instead, he felt a quiet determination, a readiness to face the challenges ahead while embracing the woman he had become. He practiced speaking, soft and confident, testing his voice for subtle inflections that matched his persona. He twirled in the mirror once, letting the dress flare elegantly, feeling the fabric glide over his legs. The heels clicked with a satisfying rhythm, grounding him in both elegance and strength. Every detail mattered. The way he moved, the way he held himself, the way he spoke, all of it a carefully constructed expression of identity and confidence. Yet, even in this moment of triumph, the suspense lingered. Robert knew that the next step, the transition from private exploration to public presence, would bring new challenges, new risks, and new opportunities for emotional and physical tension. He had survived near exposure, tested boundaries, and embraced his vulnerability, but the ultimate test was still ahead. As he prepared to move through the apartment one last time before dinner, he felt a subtle sound behind him, a faint, almost imperceptible movement near the balcony window. His heart skipped a beat. Could it be another neighbor? A passerby noticing his silhouette in the fading light? Or something more unexpected, something that could shatter the fragile equilibrium he had built? Robert froze, heels clicking softly against the hardwood, body tense yet poised. He knew he had to act carefully, maintaining the grace and confidence he had cultivated all day. Every instinct screamed caution, every fiber of his being alert. The suspense was palpable, leaving viewers on edge, wondering if he would be discovered, if the persona he had built with such care would remain intact, or if the evening would end in a shocking revelation. Taking a deep breath, he straightened the dress, smoothed his wig, and adjusted his posture in the mirror one last time. The reflection staring back at him was the culmination of hours of experimentation, fear, thrill, and triumph. A 60-year-old man transformed fully into a woman, poised between empowerment and the lingering threat of exposure. The camera would fade on that image. Robert, confident yet vulnerable, standing in heels and silk, ready for whatever the night might bring, but with suspense crackling in the air. Who had made that subtle sound? Would he maintain his composure, or would the next moment upend everything he had built? The story paused, leaving the audience desperate to know what happens next, caught in the tension between exhilaration and danger, between identity embraced and secrecy threatened. The subtle sound near the balcony window had grown louder, now unmistakable, a low rustling, like someone brushing against the curtain. Robert froze mid-step, heels clicking softly against the wooden floor, heart hammering in his chest. The thrill of his transformation now collided with the raw fear of discovery. He had spent hours cultivating elegance, confidence, and composure, but this moment demanded more than that. This moment demanded instinct, courage, and split-second decision-making. He inched toward the sound, every motion deliberate. The silk of his dress whispered against his skin, and the heels seemed both a statement of poise and a trap that slowed his movements. He reached the balcony door, his reflection in the adjacent mirror splitting into two versions of himself. The man of 60 years, tense and anxious, and the woman he had become, graceful and alluring. Both versions collided in his mind, creating a dizzying, almost vertiginous tension. With trembling hands, Robert pulled the curtain aside. A shadowy figure crouched near the glass, startled and fumbling. Relief flooded him briefly. It was the neighborhood cat that had slipped inside from an open window, but it was immediately replaced by the adrenaline of close call. Even the smallest intrusion had the power to break the delicate persona he had built. As he straightened the curtain and watched the cat scurry out, Robert realized the stakes were higher than ever. If a simple animal could unsettle him, how much more dangerous would real scrutiny be? The thrill of transformation was intoxicating, but the danger of exposure made it addictive. He knew now that maintaining this identity required vigilance, precision, and courage. He returned to the mirror, adjusting the dress and the wig, practicing a soft, controlled smile. Isabella watched him quietly from the kitchen, offering gentle guidance, but letting him take the lead. "You're ready," she said softly. "But being ready doesn't mean nothing can go wrong. Life has a way of testing our limits when we least expect it." Robert nodded, heart pounding, realizing she was right. He had tested himself in private. He had practiced composure under observation, but the real challenge was yet to come. That evening, he would attend a gathering at Isabella's friend's house, a group of people who had no idea about his transformation. The thought made him both exhilarated and terrified. Every glance, every gesture, every word spoken in that room could betray him, could undo all the work he had done. He practiced walking again, heels clicking against the floor with deliberate rhythm, each step measured to maintain balance and poise. He experimented with gestures, tilting his head slightly, resting one hand delicately on the hip, letting the other trail along the skirt. Isabella's encouraging nod reminded him of the power of presence, but the fear remained, fear of judgment, fear of exposure, fear of rejection. As he prepared, the phone rang, shattering the moment of focused composure. Robert jumped, the silk rustling around him as he fumbled to answer. It was a neighbor calling to ask if he could collect a package later in the evening. Relief mixed with lingering anxiety, another interruption, another reminder of the precarious balance he was maintaining. The clock ticked, the evening approached, and Robert's mind raced with scenarios. What if someone recognized him from his past life? What if a casual comment or a slip of the tongue betrayed the persona he had cultivated with so much care? The tension was unbearable, but it was also electrifying. This was the crucible in which his identity would be tested, the moment that would define the boundary between fear and empowerment. He adjusted the wig one final time, brushed the silk down the front of the dress, and practiced a calm, inviting smile in the mirror. The reflection staring back at him was breathtaking. A 60-year-old man transformed into a woman, poised on the edge of discovery, full of both confidence and vulnerability. Then came the knock at the door. This one was deliberate, impatient, and immediate. Robert's heart stopped. Isabella's friend had arrived earlier than expected. Every training, every precaution, Every moment of practice would now be tested. The door seemed miles away, the seconds stretched into eternities, and the reflection in the mirror seemed to whisper both courage and warning. He took a deep, steadying breath, placing one hand lightly on the doorframe, the other brushing the dress. The suspense was unbearable, the stakes higher than ever. Would he open the door gracefully, maintain the persona, and survive this social trial? Or would a single misstep unravel everything? Robert slowly reached for the doorknob, fingers trembling just slightly. The screen would fade on that moment, poised, elegant, and terrified, leaving the audience teetering on the edge of anticipation. The door swung open, and Robert felt a jolt of energy, part fear, part exhilaration, surge through him. Isabella's friend stepped in, chatting casually, oblivious to the storm brewing inside Robert. He forced himself to breathe, heels clicking softly on the floor as he moved forward, maintaining perfect posture, a gentle smile playing on his lips. Every step was a battle between composure and panic, confidence and vulnerability. The friend greeted Isabella warmly, glancing briefly at Robert. That glance, fleeting though it was, felt like a spotlight illuminating every detail of his transformation. His pulse quickened. Had he overdone it? Did the posture look natural? Was the voice too high, too soft, too feminine? Each tiny doubt was magnified, yet he forced himself to stay in character. Small talk began, casual and ordinary, yet Robert felt the weight of every word. He laughed softly when appropriate, tilted his head at the right moments, and let his hands rest delicately at his sides. Each gesture was deliberate, refined through weeks of private practice, but the reality of observation made him acutely aware of how fragile the illusion could be. One misstep, one mispronounced word, one nervous twitch, and everything could unravel. As the conversation continued, Isabella excused herself for a moment, leaving Robert momentarily alone with her friend. The intensity of the gaze, the subtle curiosity in the friend's expression, made his heart pound. He realized just how high the stakes had become. This was no longer private experimentation. This was performance under scrutiny, exposure in real time. The friend moved slightly closer, asking a question about Robert's outfit. "Is that a new style? It suits you perfectly." Robert forced a calm smile, trying to mask the tremor in his voice. "Thank you. I've been experimenting a little," he replied softly, careful with every syllable. The compliment was a thrill, but also a reminder of how much attention he had drawn. Each word was a test, each glance a judgment. Suddenly, the friend leaned in, curious, asking about the heels. Robert felt a flush of anxiety, but held his ground. "Oh, just trying something new," he said, adjusting the dress subtly to distract from his shaking hands. The friend nodded, seemingly satisfied, yet Robert could feel the intensity of observation like heat on his skin. Every detail, every movement, every expression had to be controlled. The conversation shifted to other guests expected at the gathering. Robert realized that maintaining this persona in front of multiple people would be exponentially more challenging. The thought sent a shiver down his spine. Would they notice the subtle difference between who he had been and who he was now? Would they judge or, worse, question? The suspense of potential exposure hung over him like a storm cloud. As the first few guests arrived, Robert navigated the room with deliberate elegance. Every interaction, every gesture, every laugh and smile had to be perfect. The thrill of crossdressing in private had become the tension of performing in public, and the exhilaration was accompanied by a persistent fear. Each passing moment was a tightrope walk, a balance between being admired and being discovered. Then, a sudden mishap, a dropped glass. Robert's heel had caught on the edge of the rug once again. Time seemed to slow as the glass slipped from his grasp, shattering on the floor. Eyes turned toward him. His heart leapt, adrenaline surged, but he moved quickly, bending gracefully to pick up the pieces. He offered a calm smile, an apology, maintaining composure despite the chaos. The room seemed to hold its breath. Robert realized that every near mistake, every close call, was reinforcing his skills, sharpening his instincts, and testing the resilience of the persona he had worked so hard to create. Each recovery, each controlled gesture, each smile under pressure strengthened his confidence even as the emotional tension escalated. And then came a remark, subtle but pointed, from one of the guests. "You have such unique style. I don't think I've ever seen anything like it." Robert's mind raced. Was it a compliment or suspicion? He forced a calm laugh, deflecting with charm, but his pulse thundered. Every word, every glance, every nuance had the power to expose him. The suspense was electric, leaving both Robert and the audience on edge. By the end of the evening, Robert realized he had survived multiple tests. Every gaze, every comment, every stumble had been navigated without disaster. Yet the emotional turmoil left him drained, exhilarated, and aware of how delicate his new life truly was. The thrill of secrecy, the fear of exposure, and the joy of self-expression were now intertwined inextricably. As the night drew to a close, Robert paused near the mirror once more, catching a glimpse of the reflection that had carried him through private experimentation and public scrutiny. The woman staring back at him was poised, confident, and beautiful, yet the vulnerability lingered. Outside, the world remained unaware of his transformation, and that delicate secrecy carried its own suspense, a tension that promised both triumph and risk in the moments ahead. And then, a soft, unexpected sound, a knock at the balcony door. Robert's heart froze. This time, it wasn't the cat. The suspense surged to a fever pitch, leaving viewers desperate to know. Would his secret finally be revealed? Or could he maintain composure under the ultimate test? The knock at the balcony door shattered the fragile calm Robert had fought so hard to maintain. He froze, heels rooted to the floor, heart hammering in his chest. Every instinct screamed caution. He was poised on the edge of discovery, and the stakes had never been higher. Isabella's presence beside him offered reassurance, yet it also reminded him how visible he was, how dangerously exposed. He approached the door slowly, the silk of his dress whispering against his legs. With a trembling hand, he turned the knob and cracked the door open just enough to peer outside. A man's figure loomed in the dim light of the balcony, someone Robert did not recognize. His pulse surged. Who was this? A neighbor? A stranger? Someone who could unravel everything he had built? Before he could react, the man smiled broadly. "Evening," he said cheerfully. "I think your cat escaped onto the balcony again." Relief flooded Robert, but it was fleeting. He realized how close the moment had been to disaster. His body shook slightly from adrenaline, and Isabella's hand on his shoulder offered comfort while simultaneously reminding him of how delicate his situation remained. Every day, every encounter, would demand composure, courage, and skill. The evening continued, but the encounter left Robert acutely aware of his vulnerability. Each interaction with the guests now carried the weight of potential exposure. A casual glance, a misinterpreted comment, or an unexpected gesture could shatter the illusion. He moved carefully, every step measured, every gesture intentional. He laughed lightly at jokes, responded with charm, and let his hands rest delicately, hiding any hint of nervousness. Then came the ultimate test. One of the guests, curious and inquisitive, approached Robert directly. "You're fascinating," the guest said, leaning closer. "I've never met anyone quite like you. Tell me, how do you do it?" Robert's heart leapt. Every instinct screamed danger. This question wasn't just about style, it was about identity, perception, and risk. He forced a calm smile, searching for the perfect words, the precise tone. "It's just something I enjoy," he replied softly, voice steady despite the storm of emotion within him. "It's a way to express myself, explore who I am." The guest nodded, seemingly satisfied, yet the tension lingered. Robert felt the full emotional weight of the evening, the exhilaration of transformation, the thrill of secrecy, and the terror of exposure, all converging in a single moment. Every inch of his body was alert, every nerve on edge. He realized that this was not just performance, it was survival, identity, and affirmation rolled into one fragile, beautiful package. As the night progressed, he encountered several more near disasters. A guest nearly brushing against his dress, someone commenting on the heels, another glancing at his hands with curiosity. Each incident sent a jolt of adrenaline through him, testing his composure and confidence. Yet he managed to navigate them all, drawing on the skills and poise he had cultivated over weeks of private experimentation and public trials. Finally, a quiet moment arrived. Robert stepped near the window, gazing at the city lights beyond, reflecting on the journey that had brought him here. The 60-year-old man he had been, timid and cautious, had transformed into a woman radiant with elegance, courage, and self-expression. Every fear, every close call, every suspenseful heartbeat had shaped this moment. He was no longer merely experimenting. He was living fully in this identity, aware of the stakes, yet unafraid to embrace the thrill and vulnerability it demanded. But suspense lingered. The soft rustling of the curtains caught his attention. He turned slowly, heart racing. A shadow flitted across the balcony, a reminder that danger was never far, that exposure could strike at any moment. The reflection in the mirror showed both versions of himself, the man, poised and tense, and the woman, elegant and daring. The tension between them was palpable, a delicate balance he had to maintain or risk losing everything. The camera would freeze on Robert in that split second of awareness, poised, beautiful, confident, yet vulnerable, with the night's threats lingering just beyond the frame. The audience would be left breathless, caught between relief and fear, wonder and suspense. Would he survive the ultimate test intact, or would the next unexpected moment reveal his secret to the world? Robert's pulse raced as the shadow lingered near the balcony window. He stepped cautiously toward it, heels clicking softly, every movement calculated. His silk dress swayed with each careful step, a delicate rhythm that mirrored the tension coiling in his chest. Isabella remained close, her presence a silent anchor, but even her calm couldn't entirely ease the storm inside him. Suddenly, the balcony door creaked fully open, and a voice called out sharply, "Robert? Is that you?" His heart skipped a beat. The neighbor, someone he had barely interacted with, had seen him, possibly even glimpsed the full transformation. The blood drained from Robert's face as adrenaline surged. He was frozen, unsure whether to retreat or confront the moment head-on. The evening of careful composure, the painstakingly cultivated persona, all teetered on the edge of collapse. Isabella's hand tightened around his wrist, a silent reassurance. "Stay calm," she whispered. "You've prepared for this. You can handle it." Robert forced himself to nod, straightening his back, smoothing his dress, and lifting his chin. The neighbor's voice came again, curious yet tinged with surprise. I didn't expect you look so different. Is this some kind of costume?" The question hit Robert like a thunderclap. A costume? That word threatened to unravel everything. His mind raced, weighing the options: confess, deflect, or disappear into the room. Each choice carried risk. A moment of hesitation could betray him entirely. He chose his words carefully, voice soft but steady. "It's a way for me to express myself. I've always wanted to explore this side of me, and tonight felt like the right time." The neighbor paused, absorbing the explanation. There was a long, tense silence, a heartbeat that stretched into eternity. Then, slowly, a smile broke across the face outside. "Well, I can't say I understand, but I admire the confidence. You look amazing." Relief washed over Robert, yet it was fleeting. He realized that while this encounter had ended well, it was only a small victory in a night filled with danger. The suspense remained, heightened now by the knowledge that someone had seen him fully transformed. The secret he had guarded so carefully was no longer entirely private. But the twist didn't end there. As the neighbor retreated, Robert turned back toward the room and froze. Isabella was staring at him, eyes wide, holding a small envelope in her hand. "Robert, you need to see this," she said softly. He felt a sinking feeling in his chest, dread mixing with curiosity. Slowly, he approached her, taking the envelope with trembling hands. Inside was a note, written in elegant, familiar handwriting. I know who you really are. I've always known. Meet me tomorrow alone. Come as the woman you've become. Robert's mind raced. Who had written this? How had they discovered his secret? The thrill of transformation now mingled with a terrifying reality. Someone outside his circle knew, and they wanted him to act, to reveal himself, to test the limits of his courage. He looked at Isabella, whose expression was unreadable. This changes everything, he whispered. What if it's dangerous? She smiled faintly, almost approvingly. Then it's the ultimate test, Robert. You've faced fear, close calls, judgment, and near exposure tonight. This is the final step. Are you ready to embrace who you truly are, even when the stakes are highest? Robert swallowed hard. The decision loomed over him like a cliff. To run would mean hiding forever, denying the transformation that had changed him so profoundly. To go would mean courage, exposure, and the chance to assert his identity fully. Every instinct screamed danger, yet a deeper voice, the one he had been nurturing for weeks, urged him forward. He took a deep breath, straightened his back, smoothed the silk dress once more, and let a calm, confident smile spread across his face. I'm ready, he said quietly, but with undeniable conviction. The camera would fade on that moment. Robert, poised and elegant, standing at the threshold of exposure, anticipation crackling like electricity around him. The audience would be left breathless, wondering what would happen tomorrow, desperate to see if he could face the ultimate challenge and embrace the woman he had become. The note in Robert's hand felt heavier than paper. Its message pulsed in his mind, each word a challenge, a summons, a dare. The apartment, once a safe haven, now seemed charged with anticipation. Every shadow, every sound, every reflection in the mirrors reminded him of what was at stake. Tonight, the private thrill of transformation had escalated into a confrontation with the unknown, and Robert knew there was no turning back. He moved to the bedroom, adjusting his outfit with deliberate care. The dress he had chosen for the evening shimmered in the soft light, flowing over his legs with elegance and grace. The wig framed his face perfectly, and the subtle makeup enhanced his features without overstatement. Isabella watched silently, her eyes reflecting pride and a hint of challenge. This is who you are now, she said softly. Not just for tonight, but for yourself. Own it. Robert took a deep breath, letting the silk slide smoothly over his skin. He practiced a slow, confident walk, feeling the click of heels against the floor as both reassurance and declaration. Each step affirmed the woman he had become, the elegance, the poise, the undeniable strength of someone who had conquered fear, secrecy, and doubt. The suspense was unbearable, yet exhilarating. He knew that tomorrow's encounter would not be gentle. Someone outside his circle knew his secret, had demanded he step into the world fully as the woman he had created. The thought of exposure, judgment, and scrutiny could have been terrifying, yet Robert felt a thrill deeper than any he had experienced before. This was the ultimate test, the intersection of fear and empowerment. He paused before the mirror, studying his reflection. The 60-year-old man who had been hesitant, anxious, and cautious was gone. In his place stood a confident, radiant woman, every detail carefully honed through hours of private and public practice. Her eyes met his in the reflection, and for the first time, he saw not just a disguise but a true self, vulnerable, daring, and unshakably alive. Isabella stepped closer, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. Remember, she said, you are more than the fear of being seen. You are more than anyone's expectations. You've lived this transformation, felt it, and now it's time to show it to the world, even if just for one person. Robert nodded, swallowing the lump of tension in his throat. He felt the flutter of excitement in his chest, mixed with the awareness of danger. Every instinct screamed caution. Every experience reminded him of the near misses, the broken glass, the penetrating glances, but this was also the culmination of his journey. The woman he had become demanded recognition, demanded courage, demanded confrontation. He smoothed the dress one last time, lifted his chin, and let a smile spread across his face. There was power in vulnerability, strength in acceptance, and beauty in defiance. He felt ready to step into the unknown, to face whoever waited with courage and grace. The clock ticked slowly, each second heightening the suspense. Outside, the city lights glimmered like distant stars, a reminder of the vast world beyond the apartment walls, a world that had yet to see the woman he had become. He took one last deep breath, straightened the silk, and headed toward the door. Every step was deliberate, every motion poised, every breath steady. Then, just as he reached the threshold, the phone buzzed. A message flashed across the screen, unexpected and urgent. "I'm already outside. Be ready." Robert froze. The adrenaline surged again, stronger than before. Isabella's eyes widened slightly, but she remained silent, letting him absorb the moment. The suspense was electric, the tension unbearable. Every second stretched into eternity as Robert realized he was about to confront the unknown fully, without hesitation, fully as the woman he had become. He adjusted the wig, smoothed the silk, and took a final step forward. The camera would freeze on that moment. Robert poised on the threshold, radiant and powerful, yet tinged with vulnerability, heart racing, anticipation, and fear intertwining. The audience would be left breathless, desperate to know what happens next, wondering who is outside and what will unfold when he finally steps into the world fully as himself. The screen fades to black, leaving the ultimate suspense unresolved, a perfect cliffhanger that ensures viewers are on the edge of their seats, eagerly awaiting the next chapter. Robert's hand hovered over the doorknob, trembling slightly despite the confidence he had cultivated. The message on the phone had sent a surge of adrenaline racing through him. Someone was waiting outside, fully aware of the transformation he had worked so hard to embody. Every instinct screamed caution, yet a deeper part of him, the woman he had become, urged him forward. He took a deep breath, feeling the silky fabric of his dress slide smoothly over his skin. The heels clicked softly against the floor as he moved toward the door, each step deliberate, measured, a dance of elegance and courage. Isabella's presence was beside him, her hand resting lightly on his arm, grounding him while giving silent encouragement. "You've faced everything else," she whispered. "Now face this." The city lights outside shimmered through the glass, reflecting the tension in his heart. The figure waiting beyond that door could change everything. Exposure, judgment, ridicule, or acceptance, admiration, even understanding, hung in the balance. Robert's mind raced with scenarios, each more suspenseful than the last. Would they mock him, threaten him? Or would this be the moment he had longed for, where the woman he had become was recognized, even celebrated? He reached for the knob, the metal cool beneath his fingers. Time seemed to stretch, each heartbeat echoing in the silence of the apartment. The shadows danced across the walls, mirroring the duality of his identity, the 60-year-old man he had been and the confident, radiant woman he had become. Every fiber of his being was poised between fear and empowerment, secrecy and revelation. He opened the door slowly, just a crack, enough to peer outside without fully revealing himself. A figure stood there, silhouetted against the dim light, unreadable, enigmatic, and yet commanding attention. Robert's breath caught, a shiver running down his spine. Every muscle tensed, every sense heightened. This was the moment where past and present collided, where private transformation met public scrutiny. The figure took a step forward, and Robert's heart leapt. The suspense was unbearable. Recognition flashed in the stranger's eyes, yet their expression was unreadable. Curiosity, amusement, judgment, or perhaps something else entirely. Robert forced a calm, inviting smile, the mask of elegance perfectly in place, though inside, his mind raced with fear and anticipation. Isabella's hand tightened briefly around his arm, a silent reminder that he was not alone, that support was near even as danger loomed. "Whatever happens next," she whispered, "remember who you are." Robert straightened, letting the silk fall gracefully around him. He adjusted the wig, lifted his chin, and let a soft, confident smile take hold. The thrill of exposure mingled with fear. This was the culmination of weeks of private exploration, public performance, and personal discovery. Every near miss, every stumble, every glance from others had led to this precise moment. The figure paused, taking in the full transformation. Robert could feel the electricity in the air, the suspense thick enough to almost touch. The woman he had become stood fully revealed, yet the outcome remained uncertain. Would this confrontation end in acceptance, ridicule, or something even more unexpected? The audience could feel the tension just as acutely as Robert did, hearts pounding, minds racing with anticipation. And then, just as Robert prepared to speak, the figure's hand reached out, pausing midair, leaving the action unresolved. Time seemed to stop. Every detail, the shimmer of the dress, the careful placement of the wig, the poised stance, the heels clicking softly against the floor, was frozen in perfect suspense. The screen fades to black. The audience is left with 1,000 questions. Who is waiting outside? How will they react to Robert's transformation? Will he be embraced, rejected, or tested further? The tension is palpable, unresolved, leaving viewers desperate for the next episode, eagerly speculating what will happen when Robert finally steps into the unknown fully as the woman he has become. Robert stands on the threshold of exposure, the figure's reaction unknown, leaving ultimate suspense and audience curiosity at maximum.